This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
It actually told us that our original hypothesis was somewhat incorrect, that strictly looking at the number of days that an ask had been out there wasn't an especially significant factor in whether or not it resulted in a gift. But rather, what this study did show us is that the amount of contact somebody got during the time that that solicitation was out there was what made the most difference in things either closing or not.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Brock Silvey, Director of Prospect Research and Management at Northwestern University. Hello, Brock. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Before we jump into the topic of major gift proposals, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about your career. Like, how did you find yourself in prospect research, and what's it been like working at Northwestern University?
Absolutely. I am not a person who knew what I wanted to do for a career coming out of college. So I landed in the corporate world in a job related to the telecom industry when I first graduated. And it was definitely a job, not a career. And when I was ready to move on from there, I happened to see an opening in Northwestern on the prospect research team. I had no idea what development was. I understood the concept, but didn't know anything about how a development office actually functioned. And especially, I didn't know much about prospect research. But I felt like a lot of the soft skills that were required by the position I had. And so I took a shot at applying and was lucky enough to get the job. Since then, that was almost 20 years ago. And in fact, on March 1st, it was 19 years ago. So almost 19 years to the day that I took that job. And since then, I have had the good fortune to have supervisors who've worked with me to help me find professional growth within the department. So though I've been there for almost 20 years, I have not been in the same role for that amount of time. Probably would not have been there for that long had I not been able to find ways to grow within the organization. And I've had a number of roles. All of them have been related to the research and prospect management area. Some at times more research focused, some more prospect management focused. And that's kind of like what's landed me, where I am today. Northwestern it's a great place to be. Two things about it that stand out to me. One is the opportunity to be able to grow within the organization, which isn't possible everywhere and isn't even possible for everyone at Northwestern. If I'm probably being honest. So I think I just had some luck in that regard. And secondly, Northwestern puts a high value on work-life balance. And I know a lot of places say they do that and then don't really, in their actions, they don't really follow that up. But I can say at Northwestern, they say that and they mean it. And so I've been able to have a lot of just professional contentment. I'm able to live my life and have a fulfilling job and not have those two things be competing with one another.
That's great. No wonder you stayed. So before we jump straight into major gift proposals, it would be great if you could share a little bit about what's the team like? Like, how many gift officers are we talking about? All that kind of stuff. How are you set up at Northwestern?
A research and management team, which I might catch myself referring to as PRM. We have a lot of acronyms, and I know a lot of other places do. We are a team of 15 when fully staffed. And as the name implies, we do both research and prospect management. Those functions are not split out like they are in some other places. There was a time when they were, but that's how we're structured right now. And we support, I would say, again, when fully staffed, I would say for the purposes of this conversation, we support about 90 major gift officers who have yearly goals that they're working toward. And those officers are split over regional teams, so officers who are assigned to specific regions of the country or the world in some cases, and school program-based teams that raise money for specific areas of the university. And then we also support 3 professional schools who report to their respective deans rather than to our vice president of development, but our central PRM team supports them with their research and prospect management. So they don't have their own team to do that for them.
That's a lot of people.
It is. It's a very complex organization, and which can make lots of things like the zombie proposal project that we're talking about today very complicated to administer.
Yes, you said it out loud, the zombie proposals. So I was reading the Chronicle of Philanthropy, as I do, and there was this article about eliminating zombie proposals at Northwestern. I was like, what is that? But really, what I'm wondering is, how could that happen? Prospect management, when I work with clients, they're not complex. They might have a team of 5, maybe a team of 8 major gift officers, and they're really trying to bridge to a growth level. But wow, you're in this crazy environment. For me, looks crazy complicated. How did that happen? How did you get zombie proposals, and what are they?
Well, a zombie proposal, and I have to give credit as I talk. I'm gonna mention some of my colleagues by name because I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. So David Lively, one of our associate vice presidents, deserves credit for coining the phrase. The zombie proposal phrase came from him, and really what it refers to, and I'm sure everybody's got them. You might not call them this, but you're going to recognize them as I describe them. And these are those solicitations that just sit out there forever. And every time you do a portfolio review, that same proposal comes up on the list, and the ask date for that proposal just starts, it gets pushed back farther and farther and farther into the past. And it's just, nothing ever seems to move with it. It won't close, it won't be declined, it just sits there. And how did that happen? I think it's inevitable for it to happen, honestly. My favorite analogy of late is comparing portfolio management to car maintenance. No matter how well you take care of your car, you can be the most conscientious car owner ever, but just through using your car, things are going to break on it. Things are going to go bad. Things are going to wear out. And you have to replace parts of your car with other parts that just work better. And there's no judgment there. It happens to everybody. So gift officers who have zombie proposals, they're not doing a bad job at managing their portfolio. They simply just have these asks that are hard to move forward for whatever reason. And the decision has to be, how long do we continue to limp forward with this proposal versus when is it time to just pull the plug and say, this isn't going to happen, and get it off of our list? That's what the zombie proposal project was an attempt to address.
Interesting. So in the sales world, we would say it was abandoned. It was a lead that was abandoned because there's only so much time. If someone ghosts you and you can't get in touch with them anymore, you just move on. You stop trying to reach them at some point. And then in my experience, what's happened is a year or two later, they come back sometimes and they're ready of their own accord. Nothing I did to make that happen. So what came of it with the zombie proposals? Like, what did you guys decide to do? And if I'm remembering correctly, you had a data-based approach to this. This was no subjective, like, well, 3 months later, we're tossing it. What happened?
Yeah, so our hypothesis going into this study was that solicitations that had been out there for a certain amount of time needed to just be automatically declined. That was where we thought we were headed. We wanted a policy that said if your solicitation is past a certain number of days and it has not closed, then we're just going to decide that it should be removed from the system and move on. But we wanted to have some science behind that decision-making process and have like an actual, well, what is too long for a solicitation to be out there? Can we figure that out? Can we see, okay, on average, historical data shows us that things that are past this number of days out there don't close or have a much lower likelihood of closing. That was the hypothesis we set out to test. And this is the time for me to mention another colleague by name, Brijesh Jani. He is on our reporting and analytics team. And the task of doing this data analysis largely fell to him. And what he found was a little bit surprising. It actually told us that our original hypothesis was somewhat incorrect, that strictly looking at the number of days that an ask had been out there wasn't an especially significant factor in whether or not it resulted in a gift. But rather, what this study did show us is that the amount of contact somebody got during the time that solicitation was out there was what made the most difference in things either closing or not. And that sounds kind of obvious. Like, sure, of course, if you want to close a gift, you have to be active with the donor and you have to be constantly reaching out to them. But it was very interesting to see it in actual data terms. And what it told us was that an ask that has been out there for 4 years might actually have a much higher chance of resulting in a gift if the gift officer has been very, very actively keeping that person engaged than an ask that maybe was put in the system 6 months ago. It's been radio silence from the gift officer since the ask happened. So that shifted the conversation for us. And when we then brought this data to the gift officers in portfolio reviews, the conversation was no longer about we're prospect management telling you to drop all of these asks. Instead, it became these asks have gotten to a point where if we continue to communicate with the prospect at the rate we are now, it's very unlikely that these are going to result in gifts. So what do you want to do? Do you want to abandon this ask, or do you want to think about what kind of outreach makes sense to breathe some life back into this zombie? From a prospect management team's perspective, that ends up being a much easier, more productive conversation to have. I've found that gift officers are very protective of their prospects, and rightly so. These are names on a spreadsheet to us, but to a gift officer, these are people who they have relationships with, and they've met them, and they've maybe been in their homes, and they've had lunch with them. And so they care passionately about these people as people. And so there is a reluctance, I think, to ever just say, I'm going to, like abandon this person. Now, given that, the conversation was not about, you don't have to abandon them. We have to rethink the way that we're communicating with them. I will say this is new enough that I don't think the conversations we've had so far with officers have greatly moved the needle at reducing the number of zombie proposals. But I will say that it's introduced just a new concept and kind of a new tool into the toolkit that officers use to think about the way that they're managing their prospects.
That's really kind of amazing, because I'm instantly thinking this is a training opportunity. It's an opportunity for the gift officers to kind of test out the theory that, the more contact they have immediately after the ask, how fast can they close it? Will it change how fast things close if they have more meaningful contact? It has to be appropriate. And gift officers have varying levels of sort of natural or intuitive ability at this. And it really could be such a great thing to point out and make them aware that the data shows if they contact them more immediately after an ask, that they're more likely to close. That's really valuable.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that is what happens. It's kind of funny when we present any kind of report showing their zombie proposals. Many officers, their goal is to eliminate all their zombie proposals. Like, they want to see 0 zombie proposals in their portfolio, and it's almost like the exercise is just not have any zombies. And really, that's not really the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to bring to their awareness situations where they're simply not actively managing people who they either are planning to solicit or have already solicited. And so I'm hoping that in the effort to eliminate zombies, which means if I'm an officer, I'm thinking, what do I have to do to eliminate a zombie? Well, I have to make some sort of outreach. I'm hoping that what starts as, in the officer's mind, a goal just to eliminate zombies, kind of like what you're saying, results in them realizing, oh, I reached out to this person more times in a smaller period of time because I didn't want to have any zombie proposals. And as a result, I closed this gift faster. So yes, the more I reach out, and the faster I reach out, the more likely I am to close this faster. And that feels really good.
Yeah, it's so cool that you had all the data to do this analysis.
Yes. One of our biggest jobs as a prospect management team is to make sure that all this data gets collected and entered in such a way that we can then extract it and use it to make useful decisions. It's one of the most challenging parts of our job because the people we're trying to get the data from, by and large, don't care that much about it. And they shouldn't, and that isn't their job. Their job isn't to care about data collection, but nevertheless, they're the people who have the information that we need. And so I think anybody in this field can probably relate to that situation.
Yeah, I love how you talk about how you talk with major gift officers. And I'm wondering, before I let you go, do you have any other tips for researchers on how to approach the zombies or gremlins, perhaps? We could come up with some new things.
I would say the most important thing is constant messaging. Officers, in my experience, and this isn't true of all officers, but many officers, I think, feel defensive about their work when they're talking to us being prospect management teams. We're frequently talking to them when their manager is in the room, and we're frequently presenting information to them that from an officer's viewpoint could be perceived as negative information. We spend very little time talking about the great successes they've had because we don't need to. And we spend a lot of time talking about, here are the people that are overdue for something, or here are the people that, we don't mean it as you're not managing them well. But I think that is a message that is sort of received sometimes from officers, is we're here to highlight the work you're not doing, and we're doing it in front of your manager. And so I think that as research teams, we just need to be very mindful of that and put ourselves in the chair of the officer, and how you would feel if your work was being scrutinized and held up to metrics like the work of gift officers is. My work's not held to that standard. I don't have that as part of my job. So I would just caution people that to anticipate that it is likely that there will be some just defensiveness to this process, and try to make it as cordial and friendly and from a place of wanting to help officers succeed as possible.
Yeah, because the information you got from that data analysis allowed you to reframe the problem in a positive light. How can we help you eradicate the zombies? Is there a communication plan you want to have? That's much more positive.
Yes, much more positive than, here's a bunch of people that we think you should drop because you let them sit out there for too long.
You blew it. You blew it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Brock. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed this. It's always so much fun to talk about these things.
That was Brock Silvey, Director of Prospect Research and Management at Northwestern University. How cool is it that the data analysis they did upended the team's initial thinking about zombie proposals? And it opened up a positive way to improve proposal closing rates. On the blog post, look for a link to the Chronicle of Philanthropy article and to connect with Brock on LinkedIn. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.